This is Australia, the world's 6th largest country that holds many mysteries within, and some painful stories hidden. Before the 17th century, Australia was a myth to the rest of the world. And the reason is that Australia has always been disconnected from the rest of the world. And that's why even today, scientists Australia I knew if you look at the map of Australia, you will see desert in the middle 95% area. 90% of Australia's population lives in these green dots areas. Out of these 90%, 75% of the population is in just 3 cities: Sydney, Melbourne, and Brisbane. Today, Australia is one of the richest countries in the world, where life expectancy is 84 years. But Australia was not always like this. 150 years ago, the life of every child born in Australia, which are hidden from the whole world. In the 18th century, Australia was a British penal colony, meaning a place where criminals were sent as punishment. But the question arises, what about Australia before the British? Before the Europeans arrived in Australia, for several thousand years, Aboriginals lived here, who had their own unique culture and lived here peacefully. Then came the 17th century. This was the era when Europeans were discovering new places around the world in search of resources. For this purpose, America, Africa, and India were also discovered at that time. Europeans had reached Indonesia, and no one knew what lay beyond that. Then in the year 1606, a Dutch explorer named William Jans was returning from Indonesia with his trade goods when, due to a sea storm, his ship came into the Timor Sea, and there he found tea. Soon spread rapidly everywhere. In search of this new land and resources, the Dutch East India Company appointed an explorer named Abel Tasman. In search of this unknown continent, Tasman was sent, and in 1642, crossing Africa, he reached Tasmania and saw some islands of New Zealand and Fiji. The name Tasmania also is named after Abel Tasman. Then, about 125 years later, in 1770, the British explorer Captain James set out with a few companions to explore Australia and stopped at Botany Bay on Australia's eastern side. There he then went back to report everything to the British Empire. The British Empire, just 8 years later, in 1778, sent Captain Phillips with 300 soldiers here, and within a few months, they took control of Australia's western coastline. And not only this, but the British also brought many diseases with them, to which the local Aboriginals had no immunity. And they started dying rapidly from these diseases. In the next 100 years, due to wars with the British and these diseases, 90% of the Aboriginal population ended. And that's why today, you mostly see white people in Australia who are descendants of these Europeans and criminals who he had killed mercilessly. Anyway, this was a dark hidden reality of Australia's history. Besides this, there are many things about Australia that people still do not know. In this video, we are going to tell you about 4 recently discovered mysteries of Australia. First on the list is the Maori Man. In 1998, Dick Smith, a large picture was visible. It was a geoglyph. Geoglyphs are designs carved into the ground and are only visible from the sky, such as those 15,000 kilometers away from Australia. In Peru, there are the Nazca lines, which are such large, strange drawings that can only be seen from the sky. The most surprising thing for Smith was that no people lived in this part of Australia, and here, approximately 3 kilometers, having such a large drawing was very surprising, and this design was also very close to the restricted area of Woomera, meaning no one was allowed to go there before this discovery. Even after 26 years have passed, even today, the Maori Man is one of Australia's great mysteries, and in second place is the Gympie Gympie. The Gympie tree is a poisonous plant found from Cape York Island to the forests of New South Wales. If its thorn pricks you, it can cause death in a few days. So far, no cure for its poison has been discovered, and those who survive still feel the pain of this sting for their entire life. Australia's famous explorer A.C. Macmillan wrote in his biography that in 1867 his horse was Setetsi oi, Tetkansi oi. The sting of the plant's thorn feels like someone has thrown acid on you, and simultaneously you are getting an electric shock. So if any of you are going to Australia, definitely avoid this gimpy tree, because up until now, scientists have made another major discovery about Australia that around 20,000 years ago. Scientists found fossils in the mountains of Papua New Guinea that indicate approximately 20,000 years ago, there were kangaroos in Australia that were double the size of today's kangaroos. But what happened to them is a matter of some got nothing and nakisarta, and not just kangaroos. Scientists have also found fossils of 50-foot-long snakes here, which crawled around here about 60,000 years ago. Imagine what the scene would have been like when such large animals were here. Okay, even today, if a giant animal is alive in some part of Australia, it is Australia's last mystery. In the middle of this desert, there is a secret military base about which very few people know. This base is America's largest This is the base from where America keeps an eye on the entire world. And not only that, but this base also played a significant role from the Vietnam War to the Afghan and Iraq War. If you drive 10 minutes from the city of Alice Springs in Australia, and its name is Pine Gap. The official code name of this base is Project Rainfall. This base was built in the 1970s when the Cold War was ongoing between Russia and America, and today around 800 people work in this base. All intelligence from all over Asia, Russia and North Korea is handled through this Pine Gap base. And in this entire area, no one is allowed to come within 18 kilometers. There are also many mysterious things famous about this base. In 2016, some people from Alice-town claimed that they saw UFOs flying around Pine Gap. The base has now also become a headache for Australia because Russia recently threatened to target this base, and if that happens, so the biggest loss will be Australia's. So these were a few things about Australia that very few people know that